Hello there. I'd like to tell you a story about a little bird. This little bird's name is Quail. Now, a long time ago, Quail lived in a beautiful upland prairie, not far from here. It was near a village, and nowadays that village is called the town of Corvallis, Oregon. Now, quails don't make their nests in trees like some birds do. They make their nests on the ground, hidden in the tall grass of the prairie. Now, this quail was a normal quail. He had a beautiful chirping voice and had beautiful songs that he'd fly around and sing to the other quail. But sometimes the other quails would tease him because this quail had a little problem. You see, when he was born, he grew normally like a quail does. But when Quail got full grown and he stopped growing, his feet didn't stop growing. They kept getting bigger and bigger and bigger until Quail's feet were so big he could hardly fly. And when he did fly, they'd drag in the grass, on the tops of the grass. And when the other quails see this, they laugh and they tease him sometimes. So Quail would really feel bad about this. And most days, he would just stay in his nest, hidden in the tall grass, and looking for seeds and things to eat. And he would sing his songs, but he'd sing them quietly to himself because he didn't want to bring attention to himself. Now, Quail did have one friend who never teased him about his big feet. This friend's name was Blue Butterfly. Now, Blue Butterfly lived in a beautiful upland meadow, not far from there. And this meadow's name, they called it Butterfly Meadows. Now, Blue Butterfly would come down and visit Quail all the time. One day, Blue Butterfly came down to visit, and they were talking and having a good time together. But Blue Butterfly noticed Quail was quite often sad. And this day, Quail was sad. So Blue Butterfly asked him, "What's wrong?" Quail confided in his friend that the other quails were teasing him about his big feet. And he showed Blue Butterfly his big feet. Blue Butterfly says, "I don't think they're so big. And who knows? They might be useful to you someday. Maybe someday you'll be glad you have big feet like that." Quail didn't understand that. He said, "Wait a minute, why would I be happy about having big feet? How could they possibly be useful?" Blue Butterfly tried really hard to think of something. But at that moment, he couldn't think of anything. So he said, "Well, I don't know right now, but I'll think about it. But I'm sure someday those big feet of yours will come in handy, and you'll be glad you have them." And then they visited a little bit longer, and it was time for Blue Butterfly to go home. Now, Quail was cheered up quite a bit by Blue Butterfly's visit. So he decided that he would go flying around and he'd sing a song to the other quail and tell all the other quails about what Blue Butterfly had said about it. So as he was flying around, he was singing. "I'm a little bitty bird with great big feet. I hide in the grass to be indiscreet. The other little birds laugh and call me names. The great big feet make me feel ashamed. Now Butterfly told me to sing my song. He said, sing it loud. He said, sing it strong. You're a rockin' little quail and you really, really do belong." Now the other quail loved this song. He thought that was a very nice song. But Quail flew a bit low and his toes dragged in the tops of the grass again. And the other quail teased him a little bit, but not a whole lot. But it still made Quail feel bad. So Quail flew back to his nest and just sat in his nest hidden in the tall grass for a while. Now not too far away, there was another bird. And this bird also makes their nest on the ground hidden by the tall grass. This bird's name is Meadowlark. Now Meadowlark is a mama bird. And this mama bird just laid her eggs, just recently. And she's proudly sitting on her nest, waiting for her eggs to hatch. When all of a sudden, she heard a noise. And she knew that sound. She knew what that was. She flew up, looked over the top of the grass, and sure enough, it was a herd of buffalo. And these buffalo were walking through the prairie eating the tall prairie grass. Now buffalo, you can't really talk to them because they're stubborn, and all they want to do is just walk along and grunt and eat the tall prairie grass. So Mrs. Meadowlark knew there's no point asking them to walk around. They wouldn't do it. So her eggs were just hatched. She had no way to move these eggs to get them out of the way. And here come those buffalo. So she didn't, only thing she could think of, she called for help. And she said, help me, help me. My eggs are going to be crushed by these buffalo and I have no way to move them. And she called and she called. Now back at Quail's nest, he heard this. So he didn't waste any time. He flew up and he followed the sound until he found Mrs. Meadowlark's nest. And sure enough, those buffalo were coming. They were close. They were very, very close. So Quail knew he had to act quick. He had to come up with a plan. So what he did, he flew down there and he picked up those eggs with his big feet. You see, he's got big toes. And he put one egg in between every one of his big toes. Held them firmly, but gently so not to break them. And then he spread his wings and he flapped his wings as hard as he could. And he carried all of those eggs over the tops of the prairie up to Butterfly Meadows. And he found a bunch of tall grass and he set them down there. Mrs. Meadowlark was so happy. She was so happy and grateful that her eggs had been saved by this wonderful quail with really big feet. So she said, thank you. And Quail said, you're welcome. And then on the way back, Quail realized, wait a minute, there's other eggs out there in the prairie, right in front of those buffalo. So he flew around. He found all these nests on the ground that had eggs. And just before the buffalo got there, he picked them up with his big toes and fly them up to Butterfly Meadows. And he did that the rest of the afternoon and until all those buffalo left the prairie and they moved out of his area. And he saved lots and lots of eggs from being stomped on by those buffalo. Now the other quail saw this and they were very impressed at his courage and his unselfishness in going to the aid of all the birds in the prairie. You know, they never teased him ever again about his big feet because he got to thinking, Quail is really special. And who knows, we may need him to move our eggs someday. So they all flew around and they sang songs about Quail and how great his big feet are and how wonderful Quail was to save Mrs. Meadowlark's eggs that day. So all the quail were flying around singing. Now Mrs. Meadowlark needed help that day. A buffalo herd was a-coming her way. The quail saved her eggs with his great big feet, set them down where it's safe, real nice and neat. Now Butterfly told him to sing this song, said sing it loud, said sing it strong. You're a rockin' little quail and you really, really do belong. You know, Quail found out that something that was embarrassing to him could actually be useful. And he showed the courage and the courtesy and the love of his fellow creatures to help them out. If you know somebody who's a little bit different, they still can be a very good friend and very useful. So if you meet somebody who's a little different, be nice to them. Thank you for listening to my story.